After falling out of favor, the Empress Dowager planned to have a child through surrogacy. My husband, who was her personal guard, refused to comply and was brutally tortured. His skin flayed and bones exposed. It was said that he was tortured for 3 days and 3 nights by the Empress Dowager. His tendons severed, and his once handsome face now covered in horrific scars. A plump old eunuch mentioned that before he died, he kept repeating a few words. My wife, Ning'an. I was Ning'an. 2 months later, the concubine was pregnant. I knelt on the ground with the other palace maids, praising her for her deep blessings and auspicious fortune. She did not know the hell she was about to face. Welcome to my channel. If you like this story, please click to subscribe. There are more wonderful stories waiting for you to listen to. Chapter 1. I knelt on the ground, washing the feet of the concubine Suyuejiao. I looked innocent as I gently placed her fair, delicate feet into the basin, dripped in osmanthus oil, and scattered rose petals. Then, I massaged her feet with utmost care, adding hot water from time to time to ensure the water remained comfortable. Watching her lie comfortably on the concubine's bed, her eyes closed in bliss, I lowered my head, my eyes growing darker. Empress Suyuejiao was the eldest daughter of the chancellor, having been raised in luxury since childhood, which had spoiled her into a spoiled and capricious nature. The empress had been ill for a long time, so the harem was largely under the empress's control. The palace attendants who served her were all extremely cautious, fearing that the slightest mistake could cost them their lives. After all, if she ordered someone's death, she would not spare them until dawn. At that moment, her senior palace maid Qinghe approached and whispered something in her ear. The concubine's eyes widened in anger, and she threw the teacup beside the couch to the ground. Her beautiful face twisted into a hideous expression. I have only just conceived. Yet Yin Pin is so impatient. Daring to block the emperor outside my palace, does she not want to live? That Western barbarian slut is truly despicable. I quickly knelt beside her, bowing my head along with the other palace attendants, pleading for her to calm down. But this only made her angrier. The sharp edges of her armor scraped against the table, producing a piercing sound. Qinghe, who was by her side, quickly massaged her shoulders and urged her not to get angry over a Western fox spirit. She said it was just the emperor's momentary whim, and the emperor loved only the empress consort. She handed the empress consort a hot water bottle and then spoke softly. Now that the empress is carrying the dragon's heir, once the dragon prince is born, blessings will follow. Please do not get angry over such a lowly creature. The empress consort felt slightly better. She glanced casually and saw me bowing my head in silence. The next moment, she kicked the wooden basin away, and the water splashed all over me. Rose petals fell onto my skirt, their red color glaring in the light. The next moment, her cold voice rang out. The water has gone cold, and you didn't even think to change it. Are you deliberately trying to make a fool of me? Or are you like those lowly women from the western regions, who don't know who the mistress of the harem is? I quickly knelt down and begged for mercy. Under her piercing gaze, I picked up a silk handkerchief and gently wiped her feet. After cleaning her delicate, dainty feet, I put on her silk stockings and then slipped her into the jade shoes specially contributed from Shu province. I then knelt respectfully by her side and slapped myself hard across the face. This lowly servant was born into a lowly station. To be able to serve the empress is already a blessing from heaven. The empress is a pearl of the world. Seeing her majesty's grandeur, I lost my composure. Please punish me. I slapped myself repeatedly, repeating over and over. It is all my fault for angering the empress. I will accept my punishment. It is all my fault for angering the empress. I will accept my punishment. I don't know how long it was before my cheeks were swollen and red, and blood trickled from the corners of my mouth. She finally snorted coldly, about to say something, when a whiff of dragon's breath incense suddenly drifted into the chamber. The next moment, a figure clad in bright yellow entered the chamber, emanating a chill. It was the emperor. All the palace attendants hurriedly bowed in greeting. His cold and aloof voice echoed. "What's the matter? I merely accompanied Lady Yun for a cup of tea. And yet you're already jealous? You're truly a jealous little thing." Empress Su Yuejiao, upon seeing the emperor, immediately broke into a radiant smile, her previously furrowed brows smoothing out. She rushed toward the emperor, wrapping her delicate arms around his neck, filling the air with a hint of intimacy. "The emperor is the one saying that. If you hadn't neglected me, how could I have gotten so upset?" The imperial physician said, "This pregnancy is going smoothly. The emperor must compensate me properly." Hearing the empress consort's sweet voice, the emperor bit her ear and began to run his hands along her waist. The palace attendants saw this and immediately withdrew. The next moment, the emperor caught sight of me with blood all over my mouth and frowned. The empress consort shot me a glance and signaled for me to leave. She then wrapped her arms around the emperor's waist and entered the bedchamber with him, chatting and laughing, watching the two grow increasingly intimate behind the pearl curtains. I quietly withdrew. But I did not leave. I knelt outside the hall, gazing at the hibiscus outside the hall. I clenched the wedding band in my hand, tears streaming down my face. My Xia Yunji had been dead for a month. That day was the day Xia Yunji and I had agreed to meet. He was a guard, and I was a palace maid. In the depths of the palace, even a fleeting glance made the sky full of hibiscus flowers lose their color. At that time, his eyes were as clear as water, his brows and eyes as beautiful as a painting, and his posture as straight as a pine tree. Perhaps it was fate. We fell in love. He said that after we left the palace, he would give me a grand wedding and make me his wife. That day was the day we had agreed to meet. Under the blossoming peach trees in the imperial garden, I waited left and right, but saw no sign of him. I recalled that a palace attendant had mentioned a few days earlier that a guard surnamed Xia had been suddenly assigned to the empress's palace. Could this guard be Xia Yunji, the man I loved? In a daze, I found myself unconsciously walking toward the empress's phoenix nest palace. The vermilion palace doors were tightly shut, and I felt a surge of panic and unease. Before I could ask the palace guards outside, the doors creaked open. Several palace attendants emerged, carrying a blood-soaked straw mat, their faces expressionless. The sleeves hanging from the mat had a familiar cloud embroidered at the cuffs. That was my embroidery. The obese eunuch said he had lusted after the Empress Dowager and was skinned alive, his bones broken, and his tendons severed, leaving no intact flesh on his body. His once handsome and resolute face was now covered in horrific scars. I couldn't stop the palace attendants, and watched helplessly as he was thrown into the beast enclosure, becoming a pile of bones. My loyal and devoted Aji, whose heart and eyes were filled with me. How could he suddenly lose his mind and covet the emperor's woman? He wouldn't. He never would. Through tears, my thoughts returned to the present. A flash of bright yellow suddenly appeared before me. The cold outside grew more intense. When he left the Phoenix Nest Palace, the Empress Consort did not follow. At that moment, my face was covered in tears, my collar slightly open, and the springtime scenery beneath my clothes was half hidden, half revealed. His body suddenly froze, and his eyes darkened in an instant. He left behind the words, "Snow falls on my chest, your tender face and red lips," and departed. Watching his departing figure, a mocking smile appeared on my lips. "Emperor, rest assured, we will meet again soon." At the flower viewing banquet, the imperial concubine and Yunfei unsurprisingly got into an argument. The imperial concubine Suyue Jiao had enjoyed the emperor's favor for many years with her charming and beautiful appearance, even overshadowing the other concubines in the palace. But 6 months ago, A group of tribute women were brought from the western regions. Each of them had exotic charms and graceful figures. And just one glance was enough to steal one's soul. The emperor was overjoyed and not only exempted the western regions from paying the 10,000 taels of gold they owed, but also bridged 2 cities on the border to them. The leader of the women was named Lady Yun, and the emperor went to her palace that night and stayed there for 7 days. Soon, Lady Yun became pregnant. The emperor was busy favoring her other sisters and never returned to the concubine's palace. However, Cloud Concubine suddenly drowned and lost her child. Everyone in the palace knew that Cloud Concubine's sworn enemy was the empress, Su Yuejiao. After Cloud Concubine's repeated pleas, the emperor began to suspect the empress and confined her to her quarters. It wasn't until the empress became pregnant that the emperor resumed his former favor toward her. Not only were her previous offenses against the palace concubines pardoned, but she was also granted a large number of palace maids to attend to her. That day, after I slipped the ancestral jade bracelet to the head maid, I became one of the palace maids in the empress consort's palace. At that moment, the 2 beauties met, and the atmosphere was tense. The empress consort, now favored by the emperor, would not miss the opportunity to teach Yunpin a lesson. Simply because Yunpin's crimson palace attire was embroidered with several red peonies. The Empress Dowager accused her of presumption and ordered her mouth to be covered. The emperor had once composed a poem using the peony as a metaphor to express his affection for the Empress Dowager. The peony, full of spring tears, bears the emperor's love, the weak rose, lying on the morning branch, is the concubine's sorrow. But Yunpin had just arrived at the palace and, being from the western regions, was unfamiliar with the cultural etiquette of central China. How could she know that having peonies on her attire was an act of presumption? Everyone knew that the empress consort was simply taking out her displeasure on Yunpin and had found a baseless excuse to punish her. The pain of losing her child, coupled with the humiliation of being struck across the mouth, caused the already fiery-tempered Yunpin to erupt in anger. She quickly rushed to the empress's side and pushed her into the autumn carp pond. The weather was cold, and the water in the autumn carp pond was even colder, causing everyone to freeze in shock. But in the next second, before the palace maids and guards could save her, I dove in. When the empress saw me, she grabbed me like a lifeline and held on tightly. After great effort, the empress consort finally managed to climb out of the pool. At that moment, the emperor heard the servants' reports and rushed over. Seeing that the empress consort was unharmed, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. However, when his gaze inadvertently fell upon me, he did not look away. I was soaking wet, my snow-white robes clinging to my body. The curves of my chest were faintly visible, and my long, wet hair hung down my neck. My nose and cheeks were frozen red, and my eyes, as clear as autumn water, were filled with innocence and vulnerability. I knelt on the ground, trembling uncontrollably, like a helpless little animal. The empress was crying at his feet, her tears falling like rain, while the palace attendants knelt nearby, dared not look up. No one noticed the emperor's glance in my direction. After a long time, the emperor's Adam's apple involuntarily moved. After punishing Yunpin to meditate in the Buddha hall, he carried the pregnant empress back to the palace. Su Yuejiao clung tightly to the emperor's chest, her face brimming with triumph as she looked at Yunpin. But she failed to notice that at the corner of the bamboo grove, a figure in bright yellow suddenly turned and looked back. A deep gaze silently fell upon me. When Qinghe called me over, I had already changed into a simple, plain outfit. After comforting the concubine, Emperor Xinjingshi had already gone to the Hall of Austere Governance to discuss matters with the ministers. I followed Qinghe into the hall and happened to see palace attendants carrying someone out of the hall. I knew she was Rui, Su Yuejiao's personal palace maid, who had served her for many years. But now her face was covered in blisters, and her hands were a mess of blood and flesh. The palace attendants of Fengqi Palace were either dead or maimed, and the palace maids and eunuchs were replaced in waves. At first, no one paid attention to the death of a palace maid, until they themselves became one sacrifice after another, using their own blood to stain the empress consort's crimson lips. My brows furrowed slightly as I lowered my head and entered the hall. Upon seeing Su Yuejiao on the empress consort's bed, I immediately knelt down and obediently massaged her legs. Su Yuejiao's hair was messy. Her face was rosy, and the scent of dragon's breath incense wafted from her disheveled clothes. Qinghe carefully put on her protective armor, then gently tidied her hair. She looked at me kneeling and massaging her legs, casually touching the pearwood hairpin in my hair, as if she were stroking a kitten or a puppy. The next moment, her sharp golden-laid armor lifted my chin. I know it was you who saved me. It seems you are a obedient and sensible one. Rui, that slut, dared to expose her claws in front of me, deliberately tempting the emperor. The emperor praised her hands as soft as lotus petals and her skin as smooth as jade. I will have her hands cut off and her face disfigured. Do you think I'm being too cruel? I quickly knelt down and bowed my head, massaging her feet while angrily saying, "The empress consort is as bright as the moon in the sky, radiant and luminous. Even the empress, in her presence, pales in comparison. The empress consort deserves the emperor's favor. Rui coveting the empress's bedchamber is a crime deserving of death. She has betrayed her master so treacherously. Yet the empress spares her life. The empress's kindness is truly admirable. My flattery of her, even going so far as to say she outshone the empress, pleased her greatly. She sneered and finally released the armor she was holding, asking me my name. Several red marks instantly appeared on my chin. I spoke softly, saying my name was Yunning. Yunji. Ningen. After Aji's death, there was no longer any peace in the world. Only Yunning remained. After hearing my name, she leaned lazily against the imperial concubine's couch, eating the purple grapes that Qinghe had peeled for her. She glanced at the palace maid beside her, who handed me a delicate wine cup. It was a cup of poison. Su Jiao's red lips parted slightly, and her voice, as cold as a snake's, echoed, "From now on, you will be the one to attend to me closely. Go send Rui on her way." The emperor had few heirs, only a few princesses, so he placed great importance on the concubine's pregnancy. Additionally, her father, the chancellor, had recommended several officials who played a significant role in the flood relief efforts in Jiangnan. The emperor's favor towards Su Yuejiao grew even stronger than before. As I lit the lamps outside the hall, I saw the shadows of the two of them playing and laughing in the window. I knew what the empress consort feared most. So whenever the emperor and empress consort were together, I would step back on my own. Su Yuejiao saw that I was so perceptive and was very pleased, trusting me even more. But she didn't know that the arrow was hidden in the shadows, ready to strike. As night fell, palace attendants bustled about bringing hot water and arranging meals in the kitchen. I knelt properly, holding the candle high above my head with both hands. No one noticed that my hair had begun to come loose. A few long strands fell across my chest, creating a disheveled yet beautiful sight. As before, the emperor left after the empress had fallen asleep. As soon as he stepped out of the hall, the shadow of the lamp I was holding trembled slightly. He recognized me as the maidservant who had saved the concubine that day. A cool breeze blew outside the hall, gently lifting his bright yellow robe. As the emperor, he exuded the noble demeanor of the imperial family. Shinjingji slowly approached me, his handsome peach blossom eyes scanning me up and down. His deep eyes revealed no emotion. Do you know that the most taboo thing for a lamp bearer is to be unable to remain as still as a pine tree? If the candle flame flickers at will, how can one fulfill the duty of a lamp bearer? I stared at him, showing no trace of panic or fear, but instead a hint of cunning and innocence. I spoke softly. The emperor is the true dragon of heaven. As a servant, seeing the emperor is like seeing the true dragon, and my heart naturally races. If this action displeases the emperor, please punish me as you see fit. But the ink-stained red candle wax, suddenly appearing at the window, made me think it was you. I am guilty, but no matter how the emperor punishes me, I know that as long as I see the true dragon again, I will, every time, be overwhelmed by desire. Hearing my words, his eyes flickered uncertainly, and I clearly saw a fleeting glimpse of desire. He had fallen for me. I knew that after saving the Empress that day, he had already developed a slight interest in me. If he disliked me, I would never appear in the Empress's palace again after that day. But he did nothing. The woman he had just made love to was sleeping soundly on the bed in the palace. And her maid, with her hair slightly disheveled, her eyes shy and watery, was teasing him with a subtle allure. Such a game of teasing and tempting. He wouldn't refuse. The next moment, he leaned down gently and caught the faint scent of lilies on my body. In his eyes, there was a hint of interest and amusement. The figure in bright yellow turned and left, leaving a few words behind. The mountain moon knows nothing of the heart, and the wind and flowers fall before our eyes. The lotus is delicate, I cannot bear to see it blown away by the autumn wind. Go inside and rest. The dark night concealed the coldness in my eyes, and a faint, barely perceptible sneer curled my lips. Your Majesty, is this amusing? Then let your heart itch a little longer. After all, the real show has only just begun. The weather grew colder, and the Empress's belly grew larger. Due to her pregnancy, her temper became even more unpredictable. The palace maids around her walked on eggshells, fearing that a single wrong word would earn them a beating. A few days ago, a palace maid who was dressing her accidentally pulled a strand of her hair and was arbitrarily sent to an old eunuch. Yesterday, that palace maid, unable to bear the humiliation, hanged herself. In her presence, I serve her with even greater caution. Even when faced with beatings and insults, I remain fully devoted to her. And she has grown to trust me more and more. The senior palace maid by her side, Qinghe, recently contracted tuberculosis and has since disappeared without a trace. Everyone in the palace said she must have died in some remote corner of the palace. After searching for several days, the Empress consort assumed she was dead and only had a few people keep watch. If they saw her, they were to report back. With Qinghe missing, I became the most favored palace maid in the Empress consort's eyes. Meanwhile, the Empress, who had been bedridden with illness, finally recovered. Upon hearing that the Emperor and Empress were dining together, the Empress Dowager flew into a rage and smashed all the porcelain in the palace. I knelt down to calm her, reminding her that there was still a young prince in her womb. The Empress's birthday banquet is next month. The Emperor must be busy preparing a surprise for her. She finally calmed down a bit and ordered me to fetch the pregnancy medicine. As I turned the corner on my way to the Imperial Hospital, I spotted a shadowy figure lurking in the shadows. On the day of the birthday banquet, it happened to snow. The palace attendants had been busy decorating and cleaning since early morning, and the entire Phoenix Nest Palace was adorned with red plum blossoms. Looking grand and magnificent, the palace attendants were busy setting up the banquet tables, and the troupe of actors hired from outside the palace had already arrived. However, due to the recent snowstorm in Guangzhou, the emperor was busy with state affairs and had not yet arrived. I told her that the emperor must not be late, or else it would be a great disappointment to the empress. Sure enough, upon hearing this, she ordered me to go to the Hall of Austere Government to summon the emperor immediately. But she did not know that once I left the Phoenix Nest Palace today, I would not be returning. When I arrived at the Hall of Austere Government, the emperor was writing. His brush strokes were vigorous and powerful, as graceful as a dragon in flight. Truly the calligraphy of Wang Shiji, with his clerical script as elegant as orchids and bamboo. Outside, snow was falling heavily, but inside, the charcoal fire burned brightly, filling the room with warmth. The sight of him writing by the small window evoked a sense of tranquil elegance. At that moment, he caught the familiar scent of lilies and turned to look behind him. Seeing me, his eyebrows twitched slightly, and he unconsciously stopped writing. "Did the Empress send you to summon me?" I knelt down and bowed my head, not responding, but instead recited a poem, a delicate dice with red beans inside. "Does you know how deep my love is?" He laughed heartily upon hearing this. Flinging the brush from his hand, the ink splashed onto the fine chien paper. Such a beautiful piece of calligraphy, ruined in an instant. His towering figure loomed over me as I knelt on the ground, like a god. The next moment, his slender fingers gripped my chin, and the faint scent of dragon's blood incense wafted toward me. I clearly saw a hint of desire in his eyes. "This poem, was it the Empress consort who had you bring it to me?" I smiled faintly and tilted my head, saying, "Your Majesty, this poem could have been written by the Empress consort. Or it could be someone who admires you deeply, composing it to ease the pain of separation. Your Majesty is the Emperor, whoever you say it is." "It is." Sure enough. My words pleased him greatly. He covered my lips with his fingertips and caressed them repeatedly. Seeing his breathing become heavier, I knew the time had come. My fingertips gently brushed his hand and gradually moved upward, wandering over his clothes. He could no longer resist this naked provocation and pulled the pearwood hairpin from my hair. With the breeze blowing through the hall, my long black hair fell to the ground, fluttering along with my white jade-colored robe. With my carefully applied makeup, I looked like a cold and beautiful immortal. At that moment, a few strands of my hair floated across his face, accompanied by the faint scent of lilies. A look of amazement flashed in his eyes. "I have never seen anyone like you before. You surpass Song Yu and are as beautiful as Gao Tang." Shinjingji picked me up horizontally and walked toward the golden dragon bed, casually tossing aside the pearwood hairpin. "The pearwood hairpin is too plain. Keep it. My harem is not lacking in gold hairpins and jade ornaments. As my woman, I will ensure you a life of glory and prosperity." When the Empress Dowager requested an audience outside the hall, the imperial edict conferring upon me the title of Rongfei had just been issued. A sound of something falling to the ground echoed outside the hall, quickly returning to normal. At that moment, I lay in the emperor's embrace, watching him close his eyes to rest. His profile was truly beautiful, with sharp, defined features. At first glance, I mistook him for my Aji. If I had married Aji, he would have been like this, holding me close every night. Wouldn't he? I couldn't help but touch his eyebrows and the corners of his mouth, imagining he was my Aji. The next moment, Shinjingji grabbed my hand and flipped me over. His peach-colored eyes filled with tenderness. "You silly girl. There are thousands of beauties in the harem, but only you make me feel amused. You not only make me think of you day and night, but you also make me break the ancestral rules for you. The Empress Dowager is arrogant, and I am her senior palace maid. If my rank were lower, the Empress Dowager would certainly cause trouble for me. So he gave me such a high rank." A tear slid down my cheek, and I wrapped my jade-like arm around his neck. My soft voice echoed, "To be favored by the emperor and have the honor of serving him is the greatest fortune of my life. I dare not ask for more. I only pray to be by your side forever." He held my face, thinking I was crying out of joy, and wiped away my tears. "You, now that you're the empress, why are you still calling yourself a servant?" He didn't know that I was crying because I missed my Aji so much. Another wave of kisses swept over me, and the bright yellow bed curtains trembled lightly. Beneath him, I laughed freely yet sorrowfully. Su Yue Jiao, do you like this birthday gift? The emperor has granted me the palace of eternal joy, which is very close to his sleeping quarters. The next day, an uninvited guest arrived at the palace. I looked at the pregnant concubine, bowed respectfully, but my eyes betrayed a hint of contempt and satisfaction. I did it on purpose. Sure enough, this made her even more furious. So much so that she didn't notice the palace maid behind me slipping away. The next moment, my face was struck hard, and blood trickled from the corner of my mouth. Su Yuejiao's eyes turned bloodshot as she choked my neck with all her strength. Her gaze filled with jealousy. You worthless slut. You're indeed a seductive fox. I was too lenient with you. If I had known this, I should have killed you long ago. I never knew that you slut, dared to secretly seduce the emperor. The palace maid beside me fought desperately to pull her away. Looking at her messy hair, I felt completely satisfied. During the struggle, her moon-white clothes suddenly loosened, revealing a bruise on her neck. She looked at my neck with eyes like poison. I pretended not to see it and pinned a rose-encrusted gold hairpin in my hair. Looking at the beautiful face in the bronze mirror, with its flower-like smile and bright, white teeth, I spoke slowly and calmly. The emperor has summoned me to dine with him, now that the emperor is so busy with state affairs. I am fortunate to be able to alleviate his worries and bring him some joy. Sister, if you act this way and miss the appointed time, the emperor will blame us. Neither of us can bear such a responsibility. Upon hearing this, she rushed forward and slapped me across the face. Then she pulled the hairpin from her bun and spoke with a venomous tone. You, a lowly servant, dare to climb so high as to challenge this palace? This palace detests anyone who dares to share my favor. This boundless love and supreme honor are meant for this palace alone. I'll destroy your fox-like face and see how you dare to seduce the emperor. But before she could act, a figure in bright yellow appeared before her, firmly grasping her hand. I threw myself into his arms, saying nothing, only crying. He shielded me behind him, his expression growing colder as he looked at the Empress. Empress, it is I who pity her. Why do you blame me? I know she was once your maidservant. It was because of your arrogant nature that I made an exception and granted her the title of Empress. Your behavior today is unbecoming of a concubine. I spare you today because you carry the emperor's child. Return to the palace and rest. You need not see me again before the birth. Then, Shinjingji's broad, strong hand pulled me away from the Changel Palace. I glanced back secretly and saw the various expressions on the empress consort's face. Jealousy, regret, anger, resentment, betrayal, loss, sadness, hatred. Even if you love something, eating the same delicacies every day will eventually grow tiresome. It's better to have ordinary rice porridge, which is warm and comforting. Facing the emperor who rules the world, I have my own way. I snuggled tightly into his arms, like a small flower battered by a rainstorm, and said in a delicate and pitiful voice, Your Majesty, I have been lonely and helpless since I was a child. Everything I have now is given to me by your Majesty. I will always remember that you are the one I rely on for my entire life. Seeing the tears and handprints on my face, he gripped my hand tighter, his grip growing firmer. Any man in the world would want to be admired by countless women. In his heart, I am a weak woman. He gave me wealth and honor, he is my hero. But even if he is a hero, how can he tolerate his favorite concubine being so spoiled and arrogant? Snowflakes fell gently from the sky. I gently brushed the snow off the emperor's cloak and burrowed into his warm embrace. He did not kill Bo Ren, but Bo Ren died because of him. Those who harmed my Aji will not escape. The concubine's pregnancy was not going smoothly. She did not pay attention to her diet during pregnancy, causing the fetus to grow too large. The midwives were busy inside, working non-stop. I stood outside the hall with the emperor, the empress dowager, and the empress, waiting anxiously. Since the empress consort was confined to her quarters, she has become much more obedient. But I know she won't stay this way. As I watched the basins of blood being carried out, the emperor furrowed his brows and gripped my hand tightly. I spoke softly to comfort her, saying that the empress consort is a virtuous woman and will surely overcome this crisis. Then I knelt outside the hall and recited scriptures for her. Seeing how concerned I was for the empress consort, Shinjingji looked at me with a touch of pity in his eyes. In his heart, he believed that despite the empress consort's harsh treatment of me, I was so magnanimous as to pray for her well-being. It was because of my kindness. He did not know that I had been reviewing the empress consort's medical records every day. I knew that this pregnancy was not in danger. She would simply have to endure some hardship. After all, once this child was born, things would become much more interesting. Moments later, the sound of an infant's cries echoed from within the hall. Shinjingji was overjoyed and even more excited upon learning that it was a pair of twins. After all, there were only 3 princesses in the palace, and this was his only son. The empress consort, exhausted from her efforts, had already fallen into a deep sleep. A wet nurse took advantage of the moment when no one was looking and gave me a subtle glance. I immediately understood. Suyue Jiao, do you still want imperial favor after today? It's unlikely you'll get it anymore. When the emperor arrived at the empress's palace with a gloomy expression, I was playing chess with the empress and Yun Pin. We heard that he had just had an argument with the imperial concubine. For the first time, he didn't comfort her and left the Phoenix Nest Palace directly. Seeing us enjoying ourselves, he spoke in a sarcastic tone. I've been searching for Rong Fei for ages. She's certainly found a good place to hide from me. Hearing this, we all burst into laughter. I hurried forward and spoke softly, inviting him to sit down. After a few games of chess, the displeasure on his face vanished instantly. The empress was radiant and graceful that day. Resembling a fairy, he deliberately let her win a few moves. Moreover, while playing chess, his gaze kept drifting toward the empress. I covered my mouth and giggled, remaining silent. Incense was lit early in the palace, and I gave Yun Pin a subtle nod. The next moment, Yun Pin suddenly felt unwell, and I volunteered to escort her back. That night, news spread that the emperor had spent the night in the empress's palace. After the spring, various petitions regarding the succession of the crown prince began to circulate in the court. Among them, the voices of the chancellor's faction were the loudest. The empress had merely asked her father to speak on her behalf. Yet the chancellor's faction was already so impatient. His own daughter had already attained the rank of imperial consort. What else could he possibly want? But then again, if his grandson became crown prince, wouldn't his chancellor's mansion become even more prestigious? When the emperor arrived, I was sewing his nightgown. He embraced me from behind, the fragrant scent of dragon's blood mingling with the heavy smell of alcohol. Then he sighed. My beloved concubine, have I grown old? The last stitch fell, and a beautiful cloud appeared on the sleeve. Loving him had become a habit, and embroidering a white cloud had also become a habit. After finishing, I realized it was the emperor's nightgown. I dropped the nightgown and turned to embrace him. Which foolish minister dares to say the emperor is old? I'll pluck out all his beard. The emperor is in the prime of his life, and the young prince is only a month old. Why establish a crown prince now? Your Majesty, I know that concubines should not meddle in state affairs, but the emperor is only in his late 20s. The talk of establishing a crown prince is likely the scheme of someone with ulterior motives. After hearing my words, I could see clearly. His eyes, which had been slightly drunk just a moment ago, were now suddenly clear and frightening. Suspicion was like a seed. Once planted in the heart, it quickly took root and sprouted. Seeing his gloomy expression, I quickly knelt down and said that I had spoken out of turn and begged him to forgive me. But I knew that my few words coincided with his worries. When it came to imperial power, even a father and son could end up fighting each other with swords. Not to mention, he helped me up. His voice no longer slurred. My beloved concubine, what crime have you committed? I am grateful to you for reminding me. Now that I think about it, there are probably more and more people with ulterior motives in the imperial court. I will go to the Hall of Diligent Government first and come back to keep you company tonight. Watching his departing figure, a hint of cruelty flashed in my eyes. Then, I summoned my trusted confidant and whispered a few words to her. When the ministers under the chancellor once again requested the emperor to appoint a crown prince, the emperor flew into a rage. It was said that in front of all the ministers, Shuangwen lost his temper and stormed out. After hearing this, I took the food box from the small kitchen and rushed straight to the Hall of Austere Government. After waiting outside for a long time, Shuangwen finally summoned me inside. Seeing the shattered teacups scattered on the ground, I set down the lychee and millet porridge in my hands and began massaging the pressure points on his head. As he gradually relaxed, I spoke slowly. Your Majesty is a wise ruler of the realm. How could someone cause you such distress? I truly feel heartbroken for you. I know nothing of court affairs. All I know is that the realm must be unified and prosperous, and the people must thrive. With your Majesty here, it is truly a blessing for all the people. If anyone cannot see this truth, then they are truly blind and deaf. Seeing me speak thus, his expression softened slightly. He said that even a woman of the inner palace understood the truth, while the chancellor and others had become senile fools. He gently stroked my face, praising me as his flower that understands his words. I smiled softly without speaking. The next moment, a eunuch approached him and presented several letters. I immediately knelt and withdrew, hearing his angry voice from behind. I never knew that the chancellor's subordinates were so bold as to collude with the Prince of Beiping to plead for mercy for a corrupt official. He is the chancellor's man. This is clearly the chancellor's intention. Does the chancellor truly believe I am still the naive child I once was? Issue an edict. The sentence of exile for the criminal Li is commuted to immediate execution. He dared to plead for the criminal minister. So I will cut off the criminal minister's head. I will show the chancellor who the true emperor is now. This empire belongs to the Shen clan, not the Su clan. The empress has been in good spirits lately. After giving birth to a son, the consort was favored by the emperor. But for some reason, she has since fallen out of his grace. Originally, the consort was arrogant and domineering, while the empress was gentle and did not like to compete with her. But now that the imperial consort is no longer there to suppress her, she doesn't mind using the phoenix seal in her hands to regain control of the 6 palaces. Her father was the grand tutor to 2 princes, and his status was unparalleled. The daughter he raised was naturally well-educated and well-mannered, with a temperament that was beyond reproach. Sitting by the window of the orchid and bamboo pavilion, she painted with a brush. Her temperament ethereal and beautiful like a painting. Seeing the joy on my face, she smiled slightly and put down her brush. Sister, you look so happy. Something good must have happened. I'll guess, that old fox, the chancellor, must have upset the emperor again. I took the tea from the palace attendant and nodded with a smile. The palace attendant beside her took her painting and then presented her with some newly imported lychee candies from Fujian. Seeing her eat with such relish, I covered my mouth and giggled. She blushed and explained. Lately, I've had no appetite at all. Nothing tastes good to me. But these sour lychees have given me a little appetite. Hearing this, I was both surprised and delighted. I looked at her stomach. Sister, could you be expecting? Why not ask the imperial physician to take a look? Sure enough. Shortly thereafter, news spread throughout the palace that the empress was pregnant. The empress's pregnancy was a great joy. The emperor was overjoyed and ordered an extra half-year's salary for all the palace servants to demonstrate the emperor's boundless grace. Of course, there were those who were unhappy. Just as the empress had become pregnant, news spread from the Phoenix Nest Palace that the young prince was ill. Although Su Yuejiao's father had made the emperor increasingly wary of him, their past affection remained. And this was, after all, his bloodline. However, since the imperial concubine gave birth, he had not spent a single night with her. The palace attendants were curious, but no one dared to mention it. When the emperor once again stormed out of the Phoenix Nest Palace, the teacups in the imperial concubine's chambers were shattered on the ground. A few months later, rumors were spreading throughout the palace. The imperial concubine's dragon and phoenix twins did not look like the emperor. When the empress heard the rumors, not only did she not punish the gossiping palace maids, she even transferred them to the Shangyi Hall. That was the place with the most female relatives in the palace. And rumors spread like wildfire. Half a year passed seemingly calmly, and the empress gave birth to a legitimate son. The emperor held a banquet for half a month to celebrate. However, the rumors about the empress's dragon phoenix twins grew even more intense within the imperial wardrobe hall. Soon, the legitimate son reached the age of 1 month, and the Empress Su Yuejiao was suddenly thrust into the spotlight. The Empress consort never imagined that the one who betrayed her was Qinghe, whom she believed to be dead. Qinghe rushed to the Empress's palace and claimed that the Empress consort intended to kill her to silence her. Upon hearing Qinghe's account, the Empress immediately sent word to the Emperor. At that moment, Qin Jingxi was playing the zither in my palace. I held a cup of fragrant tea by his side, pulling on his sleeve, begging him to teach me how to play the zither. Before he could speak, a palace attendant rushed in. "Long live the Emperor! Long live the Empress!" The Empress has ordered this servant to summon the Emperor to the Hall of Auspicious Ceremonies. She says there is an urgent matter requiring the Emperor's decision. The Emperor shot him a cold glance, his voice as icy as ever. What could be so urgent that even my playing the zither must be interrupted? The palace attendant kneeling on the ground trembled. This servant is willing to die. But this matter involves the noble consort. The palace maid Qinghe by the Empress's side said that the Empress is having an affair with a guard. She also said that the prince and princess born to the Empress are not of imperial blood. When the Emperor and I arrived, several concubines had already gathered in the Hall of Ceremonial Rites, including Dr. Zhao, the imperial physician who frequently attended to the Empress. These concubines had all been summoned by the Empress. The Empress saw me arrive and nodded slightly to me. I sat quietly beside the Emperor, watching Qinghe tremble in fear. She knelt at the Emperor's feet and spoke, shocking everyone present. "Your Majesty, this servant wishes to accuse my mistress, the Empress. To regain the Emperor's favor, she resorted to adultery and gave birth to children, defiling the imperial harem." These words sent a chill through the room. The next moment, Qinghe was struck across the face with a heavy slap. The Emperor glared at her, his expression dark and terrifying. Looking at Qinghe, whose lips were covered in blood, the Empress spoke softly. "Qinghe, the harem has its own rules. The most taboo thing is to spread false rumors. Everything requires evidence. Do you have any evidence?" Qinghe, disregarding the blood on her lips, knelt at the Empress's feet, tears streaming down her face. "If I dared to expose the noble consort, I must have witnesses and evidence. When Yunpin lost her child, it was indeed the noble consort who ordered me to do it. The master gave the order, and I dared not disobey." After the Empress consort was confined to her quarters, she set her sights on a handsome guard. But he refused. So she had him beaten to death. She then found another guard, became pregnant by him, and had him killed to silence him. I knew the Empress consort intended to kill me. So I feigned illness and hid in the water tank in the palace. The name on this guard's body was found by me among the corpses. Qinghe pulled out a strip of cloth from her sleeve. It was clearly the guard's palace robe, embroidered with his name. Looking at Aji's name, I gripped the handkerchief even tighter. I took a sip of tea and spoke softly. This matter is of great importance. I implore the Emperor and Empress to issue an order for a thorough investigation. It is said that rumors stop with the wise and spread among the foolish. But the final line is that they originate from those who plot. When I was young, I heard a tragic opera about a fox cat replacing a prince, leading to the surrender of the kingdom. However, Your Majesty is a wise ruler of all ages. I believe that Your Majesty's kingdom will never fall into the hands of outsiders. The Emperor's eyes flickered as he turned the jade ring on his finger and spoke solemnly. Go and summon the Empress. When the Empress consort Su Yuejiao arrived, the kneeling Qinghe trembled uncontrollably. Su Yuejiao glared at her fiercely, then knelt beside the Emperor with a pout. How can the Emperor doubt me because of a servant's words? My love for the Emperor is as clear as heaven and earth. I covered my mouth with my hand. To go so far as to bear a child for another, is that love for the Emperor? Su Yuejiao looked at Qinghe trembling on the ground and the name on the cloth strip, a flash of panic crossing her eyes. Your Majesty, I have no other heart for you. It is this lowly servant who has disturbed you and driven a wedge between us. Your Majesty, I have been with you since I was a child, following my father into the palace. We have known each other since we were young. You are the Emperor, how could I be so foolish as to fall for a mere guard? Moreover, engaging in illicit affairs and confusing the imperial lineage, even if I were to die 1,000 times, I would never commit such a heinous act. Qin Jingxi's expression softened slightly. I know the Emperor is reminiscing about the days he spent with the Empress. Although the Empress consort was arrogant, she was indeed beautiful. Today, she cried like a rain-soaked pear blossom. Truly pitiful. I believe the Emperor once cared for the Empress consort. However, there are too many beautiful women in the palace. Even the most beautiful flower, when placed among other flowers, will not always stand out alone. Seeing the Emperor deep in thought, Yun Pin, sitting across from him, looked at Su Yuejiao and spoke slowly. Your Majesty, I have heard of a type of leech that, when faced with two types of blood, only feeds on one. If it is not the blood of a parent and child, the leech will not even touch the blood of others. This is known as the blood test for kinship. In a moment, Dr. Zhao found several leeches in the lotus pond. The leeches first sucked the Emperor's blood clean, but when they came into contact with the blood of the Empress's children, they simply swam away. Seeing the Empress cry out in protest, the Empress added the blood of the 3 princesses to ensure fairness. The leeches swarmed forward, sucking the Emperor's and the 3 princesses' blood clean. When they encountered the blood of the dragon and phoenix twins, they still bypassed it. The imperial concubine's face turned pale in an instant. Her eyes filled with disbelief. She threw herself at the Emperor and cried out that it was a crime. She said that this was witchcraft and that it was impossible. The Emperor shook his sleeves and was about to speak when my soft voice rang out. Your Majesty, I remember something from the past. A few days ago, I encountered the Chancellor with Yun Pin, and he mocked me for blocking her daughter's path to glory. But if it was just mocking me and Yun's sister, that would be one thing. But Chancellor Su also said. Seeing me lower my head, my eyes filled with fear, he gripped my hand tightly. I am here, Rongfei need not fear. Speak freely. I want to see how a mere chancellor dares to threaten my woman. Seeing Su Yuejiao's furious expression, I feigned fear and spoke. Chancellor Su said we should be obedient and stay in our place. With him around, his grandson will eventually rule the world. Before I could finish, the Empress Dowager lunged at me and called me a whore. Before her hand could land, the Emperor grabbed her wrist tightly. The Emperor glared at her coldly, his eyes filled with suspicion and chill. The palace rules are strict. How dare you act so recklessly? A parent who loves their child plans for their future. Your father, the Chancellor, truly loves you dearly. In my opinion, he doesn't love this pair of troublemakers at all. He clearly loves this empire of mine. The Empress then spoke softly. Your Majesty, do you recall that Chancellor Su once mentioned the marriage of the third prince and your younger sister to the late emperor? Could it be that your younger sister and the third prince had feelings for each other back then? Qinghe quickly added fuel to the fire, hastening Su Yuejiao's execution. After hearing the Empress's words, this servant recalls that if the emperor did not come to the Phoenix Nest Palace, the imperial consort would wear a jade pendant when she went to bed. On that jade pendant were engraved the small characters of the late third prince. Upon hearing this, the imperial consort slowly collapsed on the floor of the hall. She knew that everything was over. At this moment, no matter what she said, the emperor would no longer believe her. The third prince, Xin Jingxiu, was the emperor's unmentionable sore spot. At that time, the late emperor wanted to arrange a marriage between Su Yuejiao and the third prince. But the third prince suddenly fell from his horse and died. The entire palace whispered that the third prince was a dashing and charming man. His almond-shaped eyes exuded charm, making him the object of desire for countless noblewomen in the capital. After the third prince's death, the emperor naturally became the crown prince. Under her father's scheming, Su Yuejiao was finally married into the Eastern Palace, becoming the crown prince's concubine. Now that the old matter has been brought up again, the emperor's doubts cannot be dispelled. When Su Yuejiao was given poisoned wine, the emperor had just visited the Phoenix Nest Palace. It was said that Su Yuejiao had knelt for 2 days and 2 nights, begging to see the emperor one last time. Seeing that her head was nearly crushed from kneeling, Xin Jingxi finally granted her an audience. I took the wine cup from the palace attendant and went to the Phoenix Nest Palace. After all, I had some good news to share. If she didn't know, wouldn't it all be in vain? After not seeing her for some time, the Phoenix Nest Palace had fallen into such disrepair, no longer showing any signs of its former vitality. The hibiscus flower, which had bloomed just a few days ago, had withered and died, its leaves falling to the ground. The weathered palace doors creaked open, and I saw Su Yuejiao lying on the bed. The dim evening sunlight filtered through the paper windows, casting a faint glow on her face, and the fine lines at the corners of her eyes were barely visible. Her once proud jet-black hair had turned dry and gray in just a few days, losing all its former luster. I couldn't help but laugh, and the palace attendant quickly brought me a chair. Sitting on the chair, I looked around the empty hall and couldn't help but sigh. Huh? Where did all the jade and jewels in the palace go? Oh, I remember now. Whenever you're unhappy, you smash things. They must have been smashed by you, right? The remaining valuable items were probably taken away by the eunuchs and palace maids long ago. But that makes sense. After all, you've become a commoner. The Empress said that such fine things are unworthy of a commoner, so she bestowed them upon the palace maids. Even the palace attendants my sister looked down on are now more prestigious than her. Seeing my sarcastic tone, she grew furious, coughing so hard she could barely breathe. I picked up a handkerchief in disgust and covered my mouth and nose. After a moment, she glared at me. You're just a lowly maid who washes feet. How dare you step on this palace? I only regret that I didn't slit your throat back then. Even if I am a commoner, it is only temporary. I am the legitimate daughter of the current chancellor. Who dares to touch me? Once I leave this Phoenix Nest Palace, I will have you, a lowly maid, cut into 1,000 pieces. I felt as though I had heard the biggest joke in the world and laughed until I doubled over. Then I pulled something from my sleeve and threw it on the ground. Ah. I spared you out of pity for your early entry into the palace, addressing you as sister. But you keep calling me a lowly servant. Left and right. Even the most patient person would grow angry. Wouldn't they? I've recently acquired a fine trinket, said to have been taken from Su the Chancellor himself. You should be quite familiar with it. She stared at the golden-laid jade ring, her face pale with shock, her eyes betraying a hint of fear. My father's belongings? How did they end up in your hands? I covered my mouth and laughed softly, my voice ringing like silver bells. What kind of chancellor are you talking about? Your father has long since become a soul in the graveyard. Seeing her face turn pale, like that of a corpse, I felt a surge of satisfaction. See? I'm being kind enough to tell you this good news myself. Now I can finally sleep soundly tonight. She stood up, trying to grab the jade ring. But the next moment, she stumbled and fell to the ground, looking utterly disheveled. It was I who brought you to my side. Why are you trying to harm me so? We have no deep-seated grudge against each other. I cut her off, my voice filled with hatred. Is that so? Between you and me, there really is no deep-seated grudge? The first guard you wanted to use to bear your child was named Xiaoyunzi. He was my fiancé. But you killed him. When you asked me to escort Rui, you thought that since she couldn't speak or write, I would never discover the secret. Didn't you? But her beloved was Zhao Tai. Between lovers, there are no secrets. After Rui died, I saw Zhao Tai rushing over and learned the truth. The gentle, handsome face of Aji flashed through my mind, and a tear fell from the corner of my eye. Aji was the best man in the world. Yet you flayed him alive, disfigured his face, and threw him to the wolves. I couldn't even find his body to bury him. Su Yue Jiao. Now tell me, is there any deep-seated hatred between us? She knelt on the ground, looking through me at the fading sunset outside the window. So that's how it is. So that's how it is. To bring me down, you used a piece of broken jade to frame me and Shinjingxiu. Such a clever scheme, you really went to great lengths. Everyone in the palace knows he was the emperor's greatest rival. If he hadn't died, who knows who would have ruled the empire? Shinjingxi promised that the first child after he ascended the throne would be mine. Yet he became the father of several princesses. I once loved him so much, enduring his betrayal time and again. But when Yin Pin miscarried, he blamed me and nearly stripped me of my title. Only then did I realize that love and affection are all lies. Only a mother's status through her son is real. Since he showed no mercy first, why should I be blamed for being unrighteous? I'll make him raise another woman's child. Being with him was just a pretense of love, all for the sake of my child. Ha 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 ha. Seeing her driven to madness, I slapped her across the face. You may hate the emperor, but that is your own business. But you should never have, out of your own desires, killed so carelessly and ruined my Aji. Though we are but ants, we have love and hate, and deserve to live out our lives happily. Seeing her trembling in fear, I pressed on. Why doesn't the emperor spend the night in your palace? You know the answer in your heart. The scar on your abdomen after giving birth was treated with a special medicine obtained by Dr. Zhao. That scar will only grow larger over time. The so-called blood test to prove kinship was nothing but a joke. The calming soup your twins have been drinking recently was laced with leech venom, so it won't suck the blood from your children. And the ministers who urged the emperor to name a crown prince are, on the surface, your father's loyal subjects. But they have long been secretly working for the empress's father. Look, everyone in the harem has been plotting to eliminate you. At that moment, a palace attendant rushed in to report that something was wrong with the emperor. Siyue Jiao suddenly clapped her hands and burst into laughter. Looking mad. The emperor has been poisoned. It's arsenic. It said that the emperor just returned from Fengqi Palace and collapsed on the way back. When the imperial physician arrived, Jingji was already bleeding from all 7 orifices and had died on the spot. The last person he saw was Su Yuejiao. She laughed crazily, her hair disheveled, sitting on the ground. The last cup of tea he drank was prepared by me. With just a few words, I lured him away. Ha ha ha. He thought I had hit rock bottom and let his guard down. But he didn't know that a gentle knife can cut through a person's life. Ha 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 ha. Taking advantage of my lack of preparation, she snatched the poisoned wine and drank it all in one gulp. Looking at her crazy eyes, I lifted her face with my cold armor, leaving a red mark. Oh, is that so? But this wine is not poisoned. You killed me. Ah, gee. Do you think you can die so easily? Oh, right. You were able to find arsenic and kill the person you wanted to kill. But that was at the behest of the Empress. We are only borrowing your knife. Yes. After giving birth to the prince, the Empress wanted to get rid of the emperor. She knew that the emperor was cold-hearted, fond of dogs and horses, and not a benevolent ruler. With him around, loyal ministers who were eloquent and honest would lose their heads at any moment, including her own father, the Grand Tutor. She didn't want to get involved in the palace intrigues of the previous dynasty. But my words forced her to see the situation clearly. That day, I brought Qinghe to see her. After we paid our respects, I said 2 sentences. The concubine's child is not of imperial blood. If the concubine's child becomes the crown prince, the empress will be in grave danger. After all, when the tree wants to be still, the wind does not cease. So, we set a trap together. In recent days, upon learning that Su Yuejiao was secretly trying to buy arsenic, she immediately guessed Su Yuejiao's plan. Su Yuejiao knew she couldn't escape death, but she didn't know that the prime minister's mansion had already been raided. She knew that only if the emperor died would her father, the prime minister, have a sliver of hope to keep his body intact, or even survive. Su Yuejiao was desperate and grasping at straws. But it was all just part of the plan. In the funeral hall, I pretended to cry tears like pear blossoms. But as soon as I returned to the palace, I secretly threw box after box of lily-scented ointment into the chamber pot. It was mixed with a large amount of musk, a contraceptive potion. After the emperor's death, the newborn imperial heir became the youngest emperor in history, and the empress became the youngest empress dowager in history. She wore the Empress Dowager's luxurious phoenix crown and held my hand. She said she was unskilled in governing the country and only wanted to immerse herself in poetry, calligraphy, and painting. Her father had taught her the art of ink and wash painting, but he had never taught her daughter the principles of governing a country. To prevent me from leaving the palace, she broke the precedent that women could not hold official positions, and I became her female official. Along with the elderly ministers, I served as her think tank. She held my hand, her eyes filled with reluctance. When you first came to me, I was amazed that a palace maid would go to such lengths to bring down the empress. In front of Jingji, you always pretended to be innocent and naive, but I knew you understood everything. Your ability to read people's hearts and your bold and cunning tactics would be invaluable in the court. I have complete trust in you. Children are innocent, and I do not like killing. Before the late emperor had Su Yuejiao's children executed, I secretly sent them to the mountains, where they will never be able to return to the capital. As for how to deal with Su Yuejiao, I will leave that to you. But other than that, I hope you can use your intelligence to help me manage the concubines and the harem. In the front court, help me deal with these old foxes and stabilize the empire. After all, outside the palace, how many more lonely and helpless people like Xia Yinji and Ningen are there? Hearing the name Ji, I knew I could never leave. The Empress Dowager. No. the Dowager Empress, is so ruthless. She claims I am cunning and calculating. But I see it clearly, she is the mantis catching the cicada while the oriole waits behind. She wants me to toil like a beast of burden while she reaps the rewards. But I have grown timid. Before taking charge of the female officials' registry, I ventured out of the palace. In a tea house in the capital, the exterior signboard was unremarkable. But the dignitaries who frequented this place knew that there was a secret room inside. When they entered with the password, a maid would come and lead them to a hidden door. Inside was a woman with a face covered in scars. I didn't know her name, but I heard that she was a favorite concubine in the palace. She was locked inside, her body covered in old and new wounds. Once the secret door closes, the officials strip off their clothes and take out whips to beat her mercilessly. These men have a secret fetish. Moreover, women from the palace are a novelty to them. Outside the secret door stands a doctor surnamed Zhao, always ready to respond at a moment's notice. If she faints, he ensures she regains consciousness quickly. I sat in the adjacent accounting room, listening to the piercing screams inside while counting the silver notes on the table. Oh, how delightful! This thick stack of silver notes will be enough to open another free girls' school. I smiled slightly, thinking to myself, Suyue Jiao, you'll have to suffer for this crime. I don't care if people call me heartless. I only know that if evil deeds are easily forgiven, it's too unfair to the good people. Too unfair. After all, the palace maids and eunuchs who died at Suyue Jiao's hands numbered at least 70, if not 100. Their bodies were carelessly thrown into a remote mass grave, piled up like a small mountain. Qinghe hurriedly massaged her shoulders and urged her not to get angry over a Western fox spirit. 1. Suyue Jiao. If I let you die easily, the wrong souls who died unjustly will not rest in peace. You should suffer and live on, atoning for your sins. In the fragrant tea room of the Hall of Diligent Governance, Qinghe ground the tea for me. Out of gratitude for her service, I spared her life. That day, I had originally planned to leave the palace. But the Empress Dowager's words made me consider another possibility. Perhaps I could use the power in my hands to do something beneficial for the country and its people. Not only for my Aji, but for the countless Ajis and Ning Ans across the land. I want them to know that destiny can be held in one's own hands. Regardless of gender, the world says that women are inferior to men. I will prove that what men can do, women can do just as well. Thus, under my initiative, various new policies such as opening schools and reforming the imperial examinations were carried out with great enthusiasm. And more women began to appear in the court. Their expressions were clear, and their eyes shone with hope. They are the hope of this dynasty. The wise need not be kind, but the kind must be wise. Watching the young emperor, who was only a few months old, wobbling toward the bookshelf, I returned to my documents. Swans soar to the sky. Fish leap in the depths. I looked up at the sky. A new dynasty was about to begin. End of the story.